Good evening. We're now about to start the Lawrence Alliance for Education meeting for Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. As we start, I ask that you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Just as a reminder, in accordance with the extension of the governor's executive order or emergency order, we are conducting this meeting right now in a hybrid setting where we have some board members and folks who are participating remotely. Because some board members are participating remotely, I will be doing all votes by roll call. We are going to begin with public comment, and we'll start with Mr. Mali. If anyone else is distracted, the mic is over here now. I'm so used to it being over here, so I don't know, they're throwing me off, but.
Honorable members, in this worst era of the pandemic, when the people are dying and suffering, our wonderful teacher continuously brought hope to our children. Even when they are sick, they continue education of our children from far away or in person. In sad days of the pandemic, when the news are sad and gloomy, friends, family are sick and dying, the children are happy when they come to the school and see our teachers. Remember, in these days of the doom and gloom, Lawrence teachers never give up hope, continue education of our children. So much sacrifice, so much hard work by Lawrence teacher. When the news is gloomy and bad, and the friends and family are dying, our great teachers, always stay with our children. Remember, you are our family now. In this year of the collective bargaining, remember, you are not alone. 83,000 citizens stand behind you in support of Lawrence Teachers Union. We are united in support of Lawrence Teachers Union. With one voice, we demand the best contract. Lawrence Public School, with the impeccable leadership by Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris, moving forward, we demand fair compensation for Lawrence Public School paraprofessional. It is shameful to hire people off the street and pay them more than the people are working for us. Massachusetts Attorney General running for the governor, our citizens are disappointed because her record is not good. Remember, you cannot let our wonderful teachers to leave our city and pursue higher wages in other cities. We are grateful our public school nurses, they are first responder in this global war. Thank you for doing such a great job. Lawrence always is strong. Lawrence always unite. We demand best contract for our teachers. We are grateful to Honorable Mayor Brian Pena, the mayor and leader that cares about future of the Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mali. I have Kristen Colucci.
My name is Kristen Colucci. I have been teaching ELA at LHS for the past 10 years, and my time in education spans over 25 years. You have seen and heard me up here in front of you before, and you will continue to see me and hear me until we get answers. What are you doing with the $240 million in our district? We want to know. You, the LAE board, including Cynthia Paris, should be respectful and responsible enough to share this information. This lack of transparency is an illustration of deceitful, irresponsible, and treacherous motives leading to a complete lack of trust. You want this money to be spent on stipends, as said in the last meeting. This is not what it is intended for, and I have proof. On December 13th, Governor Baker announced that he signed a $4 billion spending plan for purposes such as workforce development and premium pay for essential workers. We are the essential workers. On December 16th, it was reported the Education Secretary says in a letter, Miguel Cardone urged schools not to, quote, waste the chance to use relief money. Quote, schools are facing dire staffing losses as droves of teachers leave their posts exhausted by the stresses of the pandemic. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona said federal money could be used to hire more substitute teachers and give permanent teachers much needed time off, or to offer teachers better salaries through hiring or retention bonuses. And you want this money to be spent on stipends. What have you done? Nothing. In order to make things better, in order to make more transparency, we need leadership who cares. Right now, you are sending the message that you don't care about your teachers, your staff, your students, or your community. In order to do this, we must cut off the head of the snake. It is up to you to find that snake.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Sunny Sky. I think I got it right that time, or?
Close.
Okay.
Ski like you're
Ski, you told me that last time, I'm sorry.
And it's funny because I hate skiing. I like snowboarding.
Okay.
Anyways, how y'all doing tonight? I'm a little tired. I apologize. Long day, but teacher tired is like so much harder this year. I actually just have 3 questions. One, I just want to know, like, why does this meeting always seem to start so late? If I came late all the time like this, I'd be in trouble. I had a curious question about, I just want to know how closely does LPS work with the DPW? I've had kids report to me that they've been walking to school on de-iced sidewalks or straight in the street, and I've had 3 kids tell me they had fallen. I've had 2 show up with doctor's notes today. That's a little concerning to me because this is a middle school and most of my children walk. I've had their older siblings who are at the high school tell me also that they have a hard time traversing around the area for it is not really cleared out for them. As I drive along past the, I don't know the name of the street, I think it's 114 where the Dunkin' Donuts is, I see them walking in the street because there is no space for them on those sidewalks. So I was just wondering if there's like a disconnect or if we can make a connection because it's not safe for our kids. And then my last question is a question/suggestion. I've had some coworkers tell me that they've emailed public comments and they would just like to know if we could have them read out loud at some point so that they know their voices are being heard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to need to take just a 5-minute recess, and we'll be right back. All right, thank you. Just to be clear, I had to, I was able to open the meeting, which is one of the allowed purposes if I do not have quorum, but, and then the other action was to suspend the meeting until we had quorum, which we now do. So now we have quorum, so we are proceeding with the agenda. I'm going to take just one item out of order. You may notice that we have someone new on the dais tonight, and so before we go any further, I'd like to turn it over to Jess to introduce our new student representative.
Awesome, thank you. So we have Domeli joining us, and I have had the pleasure of conversing with Domeli and getting to know her a little bit in advance of this. I'm very excited that she's joining the board. She's been very active in student government almost since getting involved in LPS, and started with student government in middle school and has continued in high school, and is also very involved in choir. And I hear she has a wonderful voice, although I couldn't get her to sing on the, I didn't ask. I thought maybe that was a little, out of line. But maybe one day she'll sing for us. And she's just very well-spoken and articulate and poised and will be heading off to college next fall, but I'm very glad that we're going to have her services and her presence for the balance of the year on the LAE. So welcome, Domeli.
Yep, I'll just add that I also have had the pleasure to speak to Domeli in the past couple of weeks in preparation for this meeting. I've been impressed with her curiosity about how governance work, and her and I went through the agenda and had some ideas about what participation would look like, but more importantly, her ability to, take it all in, as these are big ideas, and we're looking forward to her contributions to this meeting.
Great, thank you. And I am also just very excited, Noelle, to have you here. And, I think your voice, and not that you have to feel like you represent every single student, but just your voice and your experience right now is really, really important. So what I would just say is, if there's something that you want to learn more about, like, ask, honestly, like it's, as the superintendent said, there's a lot of information and you're kind of being thrown into it. So it's a good learning opportunity, but also there's a lot of information. So just know that if you have something you want to share, please do. We're going to be really, really just stronger as a board to have you here and your perspective. So glad you're here. I am going to entertain a motion to approve the student rep at this time.
Yeah, so I'm going to move to approve Domeli Salcedo as the student representative to the LAE for this school year.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none. Do a roll call vote. Jess?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So, welcome. All right. I am actually going to also, I want to talk about the superintendent evaluation timeline. I'm going to just align that with the goals section as well. So I'm going to save that until we get to that part of the agenda. So now I'll turn it over to the superintendent and her team for the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. So next, we're going to, as always, keep the headline of teaching and learning. And tonight, we're going to discuss Portrait of a Graduate, and Maricel Goris is going to give us that update.
Good evening, LAE Board members. Can you hear me? Good evening, LAE Board members. I'm happy to provide you with the final results presentation of the Portrait of the Graduate for Lawrence High School and overall the Lawrence Public Schools. I'm Maricel Goris, Assistant Superintendent for Lawrence Public Schools. My colleague, Victor Caraballo, who is the head of school at Lawrence High School, would have been here today, but he's not feeling well. He was going to be the co-presenter. I just wanted to give him a shout out and a thank you for his willingness to be part of this process and to be a leader in this process. So I'd like to review the recap. Our driving question throughout this process has been, what knowledge, skills, and dispositions do our students need to be successful in today's world and the future? We delved into that question and provided a methodology in order to have a response that was led by the community. We employed a community-based approach to design the project, do the data collection, and the data analysis. This was an opportunity for us to determine what skills, knowledge, and habits of success our students need to thrive in a world of change, envision how our learning experience design can help students develop broader, deeper competencies, and explore how LPS might gauge student progress in developing the competencies that will feature in our Portrait of a Graduate. So we had two methodologies. We did some online surveys, both in English and in Spanish, conducted in the summer of 2021. Those were distributed via email and on social media. There was a steering committee that helped design the survey questions and disseminate the questionnaires to their networks. And all of our responses were received through August of 2021. We held focus groups mostly via Zoom in the summer and fall of 2021. Discussions were bilingual, facilitated by a Great School Partnership, Kofi Addo, and Kate Carpenter-Bernier. Note takers and interpreters were present at each 1-hour focus group, and participants were offered Target gift cards to engage in this much-needed methodology. Just to review, our POG design team consisted of the following membership: myself, Victor Caraballo Anderson, the head of the school, Nelson Buten, LPS Director of Partnerships, Jennifer Mesquita, Vice President at Northern Essex Community College, Christy Gomez, Youth Case Manager at Mass Hire, along with Brian Norris, Derek Mitchell, while he was Executive Director of Lawrence Partnership, which then transitioned out to now be the Executive Director for Leeds. And in his place, George Ramirez came in and supported this work by giving us access to employers to ensure that we had that stakeholder group fully engaged in this process. And last but not least, Mark Kempert, who's the Executive Director of YDO, who I would say was last and best man standing as the stronghold in our POG design team. Our steering committee membership was 39 members of parents, alumni, teachers, administrators, the LHS student government, employers, higher ed, and community partners. As you see here from our survey data collection, our responses, we had over 710 individuals representing the community. Those are parents, alumni, and employers. Over 480 students and 421 staff, a total of 1,611 individuals participating over the summer and fall. You can see there the demographics, including a breakdown of what percentage of those in the community were parents and which percentage are alumni. We had overwhelmingly 79% of those from the community be parents, 70% of our students in grades 10 and 11, and 50% of the staff that participated were teachers. For our focus group data collection, we conducted 24 focus groups in the summer and fall 2021. Discussions were facilitated by our trusted third parties, as I mentioned before. There was note-taking and Spanish facilitation for every single one of those focus groups, and participants were recruited via email outreach and steering committee outreach to their stakeholder representation. LHS teacher gained 80 responses in classes from students. As you see here, we had a total of 249 attending in those stakeholder groups. So the themes that you'll see here from the summer are listed below. We had survey data themes and focus group themes. You can see that there's overlap amongst many of them, but I just want to highlight effective communication as one of the key ones that were that came up consistently. Critical thinking, solving problems, communication, again, multilingualism, empathy, and digital media literacy. After our presentation in October to the LAE, we conducted 6 more focus groups of students, parents, staff, and employers to make sure that our outreach was inclusive and the data set was complete. You could see here what our fall 2021 focus group themes were: elevated problem solving and self-efficacy, teamwork and collaboration, organizational skills like time and task management, along with respect, love, kindness, and friendliness, which were values that students added from LHS, and of course, safety. The fall themes largely reinforced those from the summer and provided more specific language and ideas to inform our final POG domains. So for our analysis and synthesis process, I just want to share that we use phrases for the domains and titles and decided to use 1 or 2 words in the large visuals only. We supplemented each domain with an affirmative statement from the graduate to provide context. There are several communities that participated in this process. We wanted to make sure that our portrait of the graduate was really authentic to the Lawrence community. We categorized the large themes of bilingualism and technological skills under communication, as we heard loud and clear from all stakeholders that communication in 2 languages, and especially with technology, was key. And the last domain, engage in partnership with my communities, was informed by students saying they wanted family support and also to act civically in their communities, and parents saying that they wanted more communication and to be more engaged with their children's education and development. The members of the Design and Steering Committee conducted multiple reviews and approved the domains, associated language, and draft visuals. You'll see them here. Here are some of the phrases: communicate effectively, think critically, solve problems and innovate solutions, collaborate and work in teams, apply real-world time, task, and money management skills, have informed goals and plans with the confidence to execute them, and lastly, engage in partnership with my communities. These were the domains that were highlighted. We condensed them even more to 1 or 2 word phrases that could really take the essence of what's the skill set that we're looking for students to have upon graduating LPS. We also made sure to have the domains translated in Spanish and have all of our documents translated in both language to enhance our communication domain of being bilingual. In picking and deciding on a visual for the portrait of a graduate, we looked at this mosaic, which is actually located at the Partham. You see there are students in various poses. The poses, I think, reflect the domains that were captured from the focus groups and the surveys, and the skyline in the background of what we recognize to be our Lawrence community. Lastly, you see the river, which is a staple here, Merrimack River, that connects us all. That image is not. Can you click on the top image and delete it? Okay, no worries. That was my final reveal. That sucks. But if you can go back to slide 15, I'll try and walk them through. One of the things that we heard loud and clear from families, students, and other stakeholder groups is the importance of home, school, and the community. So you see the 3 background images there reflected. In addition, inclusivity was important. We heard loud and clear from families that our portrait of a graduate needs to be inclusive of all of our students. We wanted to make sure that the students' images that were there were really reflective of who our students are and are inclusive of the membership and types of membership of our students that they belong in. If you see here in the river, you can't read it, but those of you who have it printed out, those domains are in that image below the students. That's supposed to signify the Merrimack River. And those domains are life skills, communicate, plan and persist, innovate, belong and connect, and collaborate. The image is also translated into Spanish, highlighting the words, habilidades para la vida diaria, comunicar, innovar, colaborar, planificar y persistir, pertenecer y conectar. Our next steps to the Portrait of Graduate Realization is to compose a POG Realization Committee, similarly reflective of all stakeholder groups, integrate as an essential element the superintendent's goals for comprehensive vision for student achievement, collaborate with stakeholder groups to align on indicators to plan for and monitor the students' development throughout their academic careers, and lastly, plan how educators will be supported to make the pedagogical shifts necessary to ensure that our students can reach these domains upon graduation. Thank you. This process has been a pleasure to be part of and to work alongside all of the membership here in the Lawrence community. This is my third year in LPS, and it was quite the induction process to really understanding the heartbeat of the community and what our community needs for our graduates and by our graduates. That's it.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to pause here and open it up to board members. But first of all, thank you, and for the whole team that's been working on this. You know, since even we had a presentation, and was that October?
October.
Yep. You know, seeing how you all have sort of completed this phase of the work, and I think thinking about the next steps, I think is really helpful. I'll turn it over to any questions. I'll start with Jess.
Thank you. That was great, Marisol. I guess my question really revolves around that one compact last sentence that I think packs a lot in terms of the implementation, right? And how we're going to take these domains and make the pedagogical shifts necessary to, you know, build those skills so that we meet that portrait for our graduates. And I guess I'm wondering if there are preliminary thoughts about that, or even what's the roadmap to getting there? Do you know what I mean? Because I feel like there could be some huge shifts that are necessary in terms of like what we're teaching or how we're teaching it, how we're organizing classrooms. That's going to look different at an elementary school level versus a high school level. You know, what do we need as a district in terms of like understanding other models that are like achieving those goals, resources to train teachers? You know, it doesn't seem to me to imply specific curricula so much as like a just different pedagogical approach to how we're doing things. How are we going to find the training and professional development for our teachers in those areas? Like that there's like a world encompassed in that last bit, right?
It is, and it is the work, right? And so it's the work of how do we truly prepare our students for what employers, higher education, and the community needs of our graduates. And the way about doing that is continuing our partnership with the Bar Foundation, who has many of the school communities across the Commonwealth at different steps in this process. Part of that is to go visit some school districts that are farther along and have done some of this implementation work. It's really researching and aligning with some best practices on what does it mean to make sure that students feel that they can not only communicate but work effectively in a team, they can plan effectively. What are those activities, those student learning activities that they will need to participate in, and what supports and professional development can we make sure that teachers participate in? What we heard loud and clear from students is that they really want real life, hands-on, relevant experience in the classroom. And so I think our teachers have done an amazing job of ensuring that they can reach grade level standards and expectations around your core content. But now it's integrating that on how do you effectively use it in activities that would transfer post high school. And so thinking about who are those partners? I know Bar Foundation has identified like 3DE, who's been a design organization that does this work and has done some work in Atlanta. And so I would love to have a multi-stakeholder group visit those districts, maybe located in Atlanta or other places, that have put this work to the ground and has had some significant movement in that direction.
Just, you mind turning the mic? Yep.
Sorry, my mic's not on. This may be premature, and it also may reflect a certain bias on my part, but I'm just interested in how that portrait of a graduate sort of, let's say, maybe moves us down a different path than the MCAS-focused learning, right? But MCAS is still the standard of accountability in the state. So
I think I don't think it's premature question. I think it's a question of like, how do you make the balance of ensuring full student engagement, full teacher creativity, and align that to standards in order to ensure that students are reaching those standards in order for them to be successful in those domains that we just listed.
yeah.
So it's marrying the two. How do you infuse the two in a way that is meaningful and effective? And then when we do that, how we do that, how do we measure it? And that's part of this realization committee to
Yeah.
kind of unpack.
I mean, I guess one of the things that I would say is that I think, based on just some of the scant knowledge I have about some of these kinds of approaches in other districts, that we may have to be willing to see some delayed gains at the elementary level that would manifest in deeper gains later on, right? Like if students are being taught from a young age how to think critically, which is maybe a slower process than memorization or, other strategies like that, then it might not show up in standardized tests right away, but it will in later grades when those skills are kind of embedded and developed. So
I will
it's just
say
a
that,
caution.
especially in the science and math in the younger grades, when they have to answer those open response questions, it takes a lot of critical thinking skills. So they're already practicing them, and it's just practicing them in applicable ways that's relevant to their daily lives, and also pushing back on, are our state assessments really culturally relevant to our students' daily lives?
Right.
So I think it's our next level of work, where we see teaching and learning really being about an experience and skill set at the same time that then produces graduates that will have a various number of options once they graduate.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks. Pat?
Yes, thank you. I think my question kind of dovetails off of Jess's. And I was just thinking, how does the curriculum reflect the themes echoed in the responses that you gathered?
That's the next level of work, ensuring that the curriculum can reflect these domains. So really reviewing the curriculum, which we should be doing every year, to ensure not only is it appropriate and aligned to standards and it's culturally responsive, but that the curriculum also enhances these skill sets that are necessary.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Domeli?
I have a comment and a question.
Sure.
So, the domain of communication I relate to because I want to leave Lawrence High School with proficient in that area, and I want to be able to go into college, with a good foundation of that. And how does the standardized testing, such as like MCAS, help with the domain of belonging and connecting?
So belonging and connecting is more connected to the community and really understanding how we help each other thrive. That's not reflective in, the state assessments. The state assessments really ascertain your ability to master or show proficiency in the content, English, math, science, history. So these are more about understanding that content and how does it then reflect in your life as you make decisions moving forward. So it serves, how do you then take that education that you received in the content area and apply it to your community so you can help your community thrive. So you're an engaged member. You act civically. You use your knowledge as power to make choices and decisions that empower your community.
Julio?
Can I just say something to that? Because I think that's a really good question, because to me, it points to the fact that we can't just use MCAS to measure whether we're being successful, right, in educating our students, and we're going to have to come up with other ways, especially, you know, around these domains that everyone has articulated as important. So, yeah.
That's all right, that's okay. Thank you, Maricela, that's a wonderful presentation. It seems like you guys did a lot of work and put a lot of effort into it, and I'm hoping that this is going to provide the product, the final product that we are all hoping for. But if we go back to the slides where the stakeholders,
Number 6?
I believe so, I don't remember what it was. Where you have the number of participants, like the alumni and the parents and the...
Number 7?
Further down. Right here. So as you compose the portrait of a graduate realization committee, would it be possible to take into consideration increasing the number of alumni participation and business and employers' participation?
Absolutely.
I can see that there's a heavy participation on the nonprofit and employers, and the city has a lot of nonprofit agencies, but most of those agencies are not really directed by many Laurentians. Most of them are people from outside. So I want, as we're working on this, I'd like to see that the students get more from people that have been in their shoes, that have graduated from here, that have worked here, and that understands the community. So perhaps to increase the number of participants in those two areas.
Absolutely. Working with George Ramirez at the Lawrence Partnership has been really effective in seeing this vision of the portrait of a graduate, and he's very much enthusiastic about this work and really partnering and anchoring for our students, you know, opportunities for them as they are in high school and also leaving high school. So absolutely, they will be well represented.
All right, because you're still in that stage where you're going to be still working
Absolutely.
to compose that group, so it's a good time to be able to increase those numbers.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot has been covered already of what I was going to say, but I think I would just pick up on that point of the businesses and employers. I think it's not knowing a lot about the process. I would just say also, if we're thinking in just a diverse as possible way about the different type of employment options, whether or not we see that particular industry represented heavily in Lawrence, just sort of looking across the state if need be to make sure that we're getting perspective from leaders in industry that we just think are really important for our kids to, be able to have an opportunity to access. So, but I think it's a great point, just in terms of making sure we're listening there. And then I think the other thing I would say to this notion of how we're measuring and monitoring progress. No one said monitoring, but I've said it, and I don't mean like state monitoring. I mean like us, right? As a system, like how are we performing against these ideals? And I really like the work that you all are going to do to think about. So how do we actually teach? Not only teach these skills, but like create an environment and an experience for kids that expose them to opportunities to build competency and develop knowledge in these areas. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I would say is just making sure when we do that we're looking at, things like our turnaround plan, that are sort of currently an anchor text of how we're thinking about not only the strategies, but as we know, there are a lot of indicators in there. And as we're getting more refined around this vision of a graduate for our district, making sure that even those metrics are ones that give us the feedback we need to be able to answer the question, how well are we preparing students along those domains and, skill sets. So as you all continue to do this work, I'll just be very interested in thinking about how, again, we're making sure we have the right metrics for us to be able to evaluate how well we're doing, preparing our kids for this vision. So happy, and obviously the board's very engaged and interested, so happy to help in any way with that.
Great,
But
thank
thank
you
you.
so much.
This is great. The final thing I'll underscore is this Bar Foundation support for this work. I like how you all are thinking of leveraging them to say, so what are examples of places who've been where we're at in terms of now the vision is set, now like integrating into our daily systems and practices. I really like that, just thinking of other examples, and we'll end up doing it our way, but just seeing the lessons learned, like I'm a big fan of trying to learn from, what people have done and how do we leverage it to just make ours even stronger, as a plan. So really like that approach.
Absolutely, their community of practice is helpful for that process, and it's geared to be differentiated depending on where in the stage any community is. So you can actually have like-minded folks who are on the same stage, but you can also, cross different levels of engagement depending on where others are. So you can get mentored by a district or a community that's already farther along, lessons learned, challenges to see, maybe learnings to be had prior to engaging in realizing the process of measuring and identifying the domains of how this is captured pre-K to 12.
Great. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Maricel.
Sure.
Up next, we're going to have our team from the Oliver give us an update on the project, and Odanis is going to take it away.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening, everyone. We're here today to provide a presentation and seeking your vote to submit the 60% of the construction document package to the MSBA. We were here last time in October, seeking a vote to submit the design development. Virtual with me today, it's the project team, the construction team, Consigli, SMMA, and Answer, and Alex Penkin will be doing the presentation, and I'll read the vote language for members to vote. Alex?
Thank you. I just, someone top the screen.
You could share your screen, Alex.
It's telling me I can't because somebody else.
Just give us 1 second. We're reconnecting on the big screen. Alex, just give us 1 second. We're reconnecting on the big screen, but I have it up on my laptop, and I can see the presentation is showing. So we'll just wait 1 second here.
Dave, you have the presentation. Can you just pull it up through your presentation and Alex can just run through it?
Stage and the development of the project. So we were actually much further along, and we were able to share and catch them up. And as you can see, there was no actions taken from that meeting. I think they were very happy with what they see. They're very
Alex?
supportive of your project, and we're looking forward to continuing that dialogue with them. At that time, there's some
Can you unmute
conversation
us?
about the budget status, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the program tonight, and just a quick update on the schedule. And of course, the really exciting news, anyone who's been by the site, is our partners from Consigli have taken control of the site in early
Dave,
January.
Can you unmute our?
And they are commencing what we call basically a pre-construction work out there.
Hey, Alex.
And there's,
Can you hear me now? Yep. I'm going to apologize tremendously. You're probably saying some very brilliant things. We just got audio about 5 seconds ago. So whatever you were saying, we just didn't hear. I think you were just setting the stage for what we're about to do today. But if you don't mind, just making sure that confirming that, and then I know you're about to get in the presentation, but we're just getting audio now.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry that you have to hear me again. Some of the folks have already heard this. Yeah, it was really just a brief update. I think one of the more important things on this slide was to talk about the volume of data and information that our team and the technical team is submitting to the School Building Authority as part of this important stage in the project, 60% submission, and the fact that MSBA, which was supposed to have met with us back actually before the last time we met, actually met with us just in the new year on January 11th. And that was a great moment in time to catch up with them, to bring them up to speed, and actually when we were further along. And I think they're very supportive of your project. I think they were impressed with what they've seen so far. Great team deliberating and working on this. I'll talk a little bit about the budget later on and the schedule later on. And then I think the thing that I just mentioned to you is the exciting part that your partners and our partner Consigli have taken control of the site, and they're actually commencing construction. So we've been actually breaking the project up into some smaller bite-sized pieces, what we call early bid packages. And that is because of the nature of having to really start construction to move some of the utilities out of the way that are on Oak Street up here at the north part of the site. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. And to also abate the building. And this is going to allow us to keep pace in the construction and stay on schedule, which is also very important for both getting the kids in the building on time and also for maintaining our budget. So this site plan is the most up-to-date that we have at this time, just kind of a rendering of that very complex site that we've been talking to and describing to you in the past. Just really fills up the site from Oak Street all the way down to Haverhill. And the rarity and the importance of a site like this, it's not often that you have a site that's in such an important cultural part of a city. Sometimes these elementary schools are tucked into neighborhoods, and this is very much a visible project that is received some very strong support from important components of this public of the city. So you can see, I think even before we saw you last time, we've been very engaged with your engineering staff in the city, early approvals so that we could start construction early. And then since we last met with you, we did get our final approval with the Prospect Hill Historic District Commission. And that's been a very engaged group, obviously because of the cultural significance of the site and the building. So that's been going very, very well, great dialogue and some exciting aspects of the project. We had shared this as one of our primary renderings from Campagnon Common, right? Obviously, really, this building is in rough shape. We've been telling everybody this for quite a while. So restoring those two front wings back to their sort of heroic status, really making that front courtyard sing as an educational space for some of the youngest children in the school. And this perspective takes you right down Cardillo Way to the portal, which will pass you through to the northern part of the city. So these are some great opportunities. That's going to be much cleaned up. It'll feel less alley-like. It'll be nicely lit, and it'll be a nice, safe, pleasing place for students and citizens as well. And then the new building, which is behind, everyone was in agreement that this is not to mimic the historic architecture, that it really sets itself into the cityscape as it faces really more on Oak Street. So just really quickly, again, you can see the Cardillo Way, the conversations that we've been having about what elements we might be able to save from the historic structure. And there's some small pieces in there, but important ones, particularly around the auxiliary gym, which is one of our small presentation spaces. And it's an important sort of heart and center in the school. The historic commissions both felt that the presence of the adjacency of the Frost residence should have some sort of significant say. And I think we've been able to find really, and it's worked out very well with the layout of the school, is a place where we could make some memento to Robert Frost and his adjacency. Our understanding is they may try to buy a sculpture, which could make a great addition to that front courtyard. And again, just tying this in culturally and civically to the larger city. And then the elevation perspective from the O'Neill playgrounds and the parks. Again, so this is, we've added some color in here, this idea that it really kind of shapes that entirety of Oak Street. Will be a very welcoming entrance that's going to kind of redefine how students and the public will interface with the new project. And then, virtually, the team really virtually builds the building before Consigli and the team actually tackle that on. So it gives you sort of an unprecedented ability to kind of cut and look into the building. And early on, I think you've heard me describe that we're trying to create this tie between Campagnon Commons and O'Neill playgrounds. And then the sort of Oak Street, here it's existing conditions. And this is going to be kind of really nicely restored, some nice trees on the other side. It'll become a nice sort of plaza fourscape for the entrance to the school. But hopefully you can really kind of see all the daylight that will come down into the cafeteria and these public spaces. And then as it kind of comes up to that historic entrance on the south side, and then the classrooms, all those new modern classrooms and amenities stacked up above. And then looking from the other side, the gymnasium is also down with that cafeteria level. You can see some of the playfulness of those windows and some of the things that will be evident to the folks who walk by the building. We also are starting to catalog the materials, cost effective, really durable, maintenance free, and also beautiful, right? So we want to really make sure that we kind of hit all of those notes for the city. And then when we last met with you, we were, kind of trending over budget. And right, we know that the market's been, anyone who can read has seen that there's been some very big challenges. Consigli has been our great partner in keeping us alert to those things. The team is laser focused on making sure that we stay on budget and do not exceed that. And to that point, we really are, we can say that we are on that construction budget at this moment in time. Just to touch over that, but the teams, there are two estimators independently reviewed it, and they're within less than 1% of each other. So that gives you a lot of confidence that multiple eyes have had their look at this. MSBA requires you to be within 5%, so greatly exceeding that. Really worked hard to make sure we were holding to that. That said, the 90% set, which will be even more detail, more information, is really our important last milestone for getting the estimate.
Alex, can you hear me?
I think it froze.
Let me. Alex, I'm going to pause you again. We're having some technical difficulties with the screen here in the room, so I'm just going to pause and I'll let you know once we're ready for you to continue. Thanks.
I can finish off. It's just one more slide. Dave, if you're able to just pull it up on your screen.
Sorry, Alex, we just can't hear you. Just hold on for 1 second, please.
monitoring the chat, though. He has to be monitoring the chat to see that. In the room, yes, you're right. So we'll just tell him that Odani's.
I've texted him, Superintendent, so he knows.
Okay. I'll let him know as well. So just for folks on the Zoom, so Odanis is gonna. We're back. Hey, I don't want to say anything because I'm turning my computer down so I don't get echo. Are we good here now on the main? All right, Alex, can you hear me now? I don't see any reaction here on the.
You can have Odani's.
Yeah, let me just, I'll let him know.
So the last slide,
I'm sorry, Odanis, just for a second. So for folks on the Zoom, we're still getting it set up, but Odanis is going to finish in the room with the presentation. Wait, are we back now?
No, she can finish it, because this might be it.
Okay. Go ahead,
no?
yeah.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Technology. The last slide is construction. This is just an update to as to where we are in the project. The construction team consigli has taken over the site already. There is equipment that is on our laydown area, which is across the street on the park, on O'Neill Park. There's site prep. There's utilities work on Oak Street happening at this time. Abatement and demolition. The team has gone through bid package number 1. It was slightly under budget, so we were happy with that. The bid package number 1 consisted of like abatement work, lead, and demolition. We are currently on bid package number 2. We're bidding for that. That consists of site investigations as needed and engineering reviews as needed. Again, this is just an update to you, members of the LAE, in terms of our 60% construction document and our bid package, not our bid, but our construction documents that we need to submit to the MSBA. And what we're seeking of you tonight, it's approval of this 60% CD for submission to the Massachusetts Board Authority in accordance with the presentation that you heard tonight, which this report subject to the revision and the final approval of the Superintendent of Lawrence Public Schools and by the Lawrence Public Schools Building Committee representative.
Thank you. I can entertain a motion, and obviously if there's discussion, we can do it during.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so I'll open it up to discussion before we vote, and I'll start with Julia.
I'm all set. I don't have any questions.
Great.
Thank
Domeli?
Just for an estimate, how many students will the new school serve?
Good question. So this project, it's going to have 1,000 seats. So it will become a K through 8 complex, so kindergarten through 8th grade. It's going to merge the current Up Oliver students, the middle school, and OPS, the Oliver Partnership. And it would add kindergarten seats.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Pat?
I don't have any questions at this time, but I like the idea of keeping the facade of that building and the historical aspect of the Oliver School. I think it's going to be really a nice building. Thank you.
Jess?
Oh, I'm very excited. I just have one question based on something you just said, Odanis. You said lead. There's lead in the current school?
No, it's no, the bid. Were you referring to what the bid package that I?
Yeah, you said
abatement work.
lead
We have to. It's part of the process for construction. We have to excavate and look for any of that possibility.
Okay.
It's just part of the process.
All right. Thank you. I got very scared for a moment.
Oh, no, sorry, didn't mean to scare you.
You all set, Jess? Okay. I guess one question, and I'm channeling Dan Rivera here. At what stage in terms of the process, like there's, I think obviously a strong desire to have local workers available to support this. Can you just update us on sort of what's been done to date and what do we expect in terms of, again, opening opportunities for just local workers?
Sure. Chris, I'm not sure if Christy from Consigli can hear me, and if you can answer the question, but when when the team has gone out for bid on the bid packages of the work that is happening now, they've done an open house. We actually do it at the Oliver site itself. And we work, they're working to make sure that the information gets out to local companies. When we start entering the actual like construction work, demolition, and that type of work, there's going to be emphasis on also ensuring that the information gets out, that we are sharing with everyone in the community or in the Merrimack Valley. And the construction team in Consigli has made a strong effort, and they're engaged and committed to ensuring that any workers that are hired or brought into the project to work are local employees and local employers.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up? Are there targets set for that? Like, are there percentage targets on the project for like minority and women-owned business firms, subcontracting, and for local hiring?
Yes, we follow all of the MSBA, and I can get you that information. I don't have it in front of me, but it's one of the areas that Consigli, who's our construction manager, actually follows and abides to. But there's minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses that they ensure that they work with.
Okay. I would love to get the target numbers. Would be great to know, and for us to know if they're meeting those targets. Following up on Ventura's question, that would be great.
Yes, we actually one of the things that we do is we have weekly construction meetings with the team. So we are constantly discussing and updating. So we're getting ready to launch a report that Consigli will provide to the district in terms of where we are in the process. We'll make sure to include that information. We are also actively updating our website, our construction website for the Oliver School. And hoping to do the same for the LAE soon. But I mean, we keep all that information there, and we'll be sure to share the report as soon as we have one for month one.
Great, thank you. Okay, any further discussion? All right, hearing none. It's been forwarded and seconded, so I'm doing a roll call vote. So Jess?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so it is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I guess I just want to kind of check in on where we're at with the live streaming. We are. Okay, but the YouTube live stream is open and it's just okay. On Zoom right now, it's just really the folks who were participating from the. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna keep moving then, just because I think we have a live stream option and obviously an in-person option, so I feel like we're good to go. Okay. So the next item relates to the superintendent goals, and there are two items here. One is the timeline, which I wanted to revisit with you all. Oh, thank you, Maria, because I was wondering how we were going to talk about that without the Zoom. And so there's both the timeline and then the actual goals that the superintendent included, in the materials last week that you all received. So the first is, thank you. Just as a reminder, this is both what we did last year and I'm proposing again for this year. I know we had a discussion on this last year, but the notion that we're trying to get to more of a sort of school year cycle where we're launching the new goals around the fall, sort of kickoff of the year, and then we're spending the summer really reflecting on progress and wrapping up the evaluation cycle towards the start of the fall. I'd say for the last couple of years, we haven't quite hit that for different reasons. I think for this year, we were actually ready to start sort of the summative around October-ish, but I think, with the focus on just the opening of school and the high school and making sure that all the attention was focused on that, we sort of pushed back a little bit the summative, which we did and finally voted on last meeting. So what I'm proposing to this board again is a cycle similar to last year, and with a commitment of trying to sort of stick to this 9-month, where you saw in December, January is really the superintendent doing her own reflection, creating a plan, and then presenting that plan, sort of that check on the bottom is where we're at today, where she's presenting the plan to us and we vote to approve that plan. And then we're checking in, there's implementation happening throughout. And obviously the things that you see in the superintendent's plan are things that are continuations of work that we've highlighted. And so it's not brand new, but there are some new things that I think as a result of our evaluation this year are new, which I applaud. So, the implementation will continue. We have a mid-cycle in May to sort of more formally check in and ask the superintendent for a progress update, and then really allows us to do the summative in August, September, to then kick off the cycle for next year's, more along the dimensions of, or the timeline of a more traditional school year. So, so this is sort of in line with what we've done, and I'm just sort of proposing it, but I'm also happy, obviously, to hear feedback, perspectives, and then after this, we'll actually hear from the superintendent about her goals, specifically. So I'll open it up if there are any thoughts or questions around following this kind of cycle like we did last year. Jess, I'll start with you.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Pat?
I'm all set with that.
Okay. Julia?
All set.
All right. Domeli? All right. And I'm all set. I think do I need a vote on the timeline? No, right? This is just, okay, so this is our cycle. Now we're going to get to the goals, which is more the meat of the discussion. All right. Superintendent, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. In your materials, I do have additional copies here if you'd like. I'm gonna pass those down that way. These goals are developed and lifted from the thoughtful feedback that you all offered in my summative evaluation. And I'll walk us through the highlights of those goals and then key action steps. Goal 1 is a new goal specific to...
I'm sorry, Superintendent. Is there any way to show these on there? Because I realize for people in the room, do we not have these up? Okay. All right. We'll obviously make sure they're posted for people to see as well. Yeah, no, I know. It's not a presentation. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. So goal 1 is new to the feedback specific when we discuss SQR findings. And you see here that it states the creation of a vision for instruction that drives student achievement. I'll note that I am committed to this goal and will be anticipating some creativity around achieving this, and you'll see those in these key action steps because our structure of autonomous includes quite a bit of nuance with all of our schools and how that vision gets accomplished. But I'm confident that we can make that a cohesive one, and so I propose the following key action steps. You'll note here, for example, that finalizing the district-wide literacy plan and communicating that so that there is a menu of things that is expected of all of our schools is a key action step. You'll also note again that using that school quality review, the SQR, will continue to inform how that vision is implemented. And lastly, you've also shared with me in the feedback that you would like to see a comprehensive plan for the resources that will then support this vision. I won't read them step by step. I'm moving on to goal number 2. This is a continuation, and then I've updated some action steps. This has been a goal and a priority for us for the past 2 years. It will remain a priority until achieved, and so I hope that you will continue to support that. Right now, the goal reads to deepen the efforts to recruit and retain culturally responsive and highly effective teaching and professional staff in all aspects of our community. As we shared with you last month, we are conducting an equity audit. We will use some of that data and information to make sure that we have targeted professional development. We're also going to be using that information for concrete policies, procedures, and practices. And then, of course, we will continue to offer high-quality professional development to ensure culturally responsive opportunities for our educators. In Goal 3, this is also a continuing goal. And this one is, again, in response to the feedback that you've offered to deepen and expand ways in which we engage our families, students, and partners. As we reported last month in an email communication, we have restructured our Family Resource Center. We have a new Chief Partnership Officer, Juan Rodriguez, who is sitting with us today in the audience. And I will work closely with him and his team to continue to ensure that we meet this goal. I'm moving on to goal number 4. Again, lifted again from the feedback you've offered, and this is also revised. The highlight here and the difference is the effective lines of communication with not only just you all and community members, but specific to city officials. You see here one of the key action steps. That part of that will be, I will be doubling down my efforts to make sure that that communication remains open, that they feel like they have been included and properly engaged in all aspects of the district. I did share these with Ventura last week. He offered some feedback. I hope that you see it reflected here, and I welcome your feedback.
Great, thanks, Superintendent. I will start with, I think I'm going reverse alphabetical, so Julia, I think I'm starting with you.
I'm all set. I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Great. Domeli, and I know you're coming into this process, but this is actually a good place to start because it is the sort of goal setting for, this year. So wondering if you had any just thoughts or questions at this time. Great. Pat?
Yes, thank you, Ventura. Superintendent, I really like your new goal, Goal 1. And I believe that it's aligned with the turnaround plan. So I think that's really going to help kind of mesh things together as we form a vision together. And also, tying in the school quality reviews and their findings. I think it's very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Jess?
Yeah, I agree. I'm really happy. I feel like these are exactly the right goals. I have a few small comments. Number one, do you think it's appropriate under the first goal and the first bullet that the instructional vision should not only align with the earned autonomy framework, but the portrait of a graduate domains? Because it feels like we just went through that whole presentation and that's kind of where we're going. So I would just offer that as a respectful addition. And then, the next 2 goals are dear to my heart. I'm really happy to see this. I'm really happy with all the things the district has been doing to invest in a culturally responsive and culturally competent and bilingual teaching force and educator workforce. So that's great. The only other thing that I would want to see under Goal 3 and also offer as a respectful suggestion is just to continue to make use of community partnerships and the community-based organizations as, as another ally in the effort to engage and reach diverse families across the district. So those are my only comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, and As the superintendent said, I had a chance to review these with her and provide some feedback earlier, and one of the things I just want to underscore is that they also are responding, I think, just very well and very aligned to the feedback we provided, superintendent, and so especially with the goal number 1 and the expansion or revision of goal number 4, I think the feedback alignment is just very clear to me here, which I appreciate, and for me just signals your willingness to continue receiving feedback, learning, growing. It's just further evidence of that. So I just really appreciate that alignment. And to this notion of goal number 1, which I really appreciate that addition, Jess, portrait of a graduate, because it is what we're working towards. Just your comment, superintendent. It's more about process around this notion of how do we, or how do you set an instructional vision, given that, there is so much autonomy by design at every school. And, I think the literacy plan will be a good sort of example of how that happens. And so to the degree that when you're implementing that with the team and learning about both the literacy plan implementation itself, like just helping to sort of lift up what lessons that's, sort of developing for you and the team about what it means to then, or how you go about developing just clear sort of the vision for other elements as well, especially as we're talking about the portrait of a graduate, work as well. So, but really appreciate just the responsiveness to the feedback that we've provided. So, I would propose or entertain a motion to approve the goals as written with the addition of portrait of a graduate in the first area, and the language was around partners in goal 3.
I'm sorry. Around partnering with community-based organizations as allies to engage families.
Great. So I would entertain a motion to approve those goals with those 2 additions.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Jess?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So they're approved. Thank you. And so I know we'll formally hear on progress in May. So, we'll be looking forward to that. Great.
Thank you. Next, we're going to have a budget update, so Marcia Jordan is going to be with us.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I will jump right into our presentation today. So our first slide is going to show us where we are in the process of our budget for next year. We've already met with the subcommittee, and we've presented the district goals, which you will see a refresher of later on in this presentation. And we've also given access to my budget file and some of the documents that are updated every single year throughout the budget process to our department leads and principals. So next up will be some meetings with the principals and our department leads to go through all of their documents and their budgets for next year, followed by our budget hearings, which we do have dates for those, and they are April 6th and April 13th, and you can expect to save the date from Maria Campuzano. Followed by those hearings is a vote by you to accept the budget for next year, and then a vote by the City Council. Okay. So the budget review by school and department looks like individual meetings that we have with every single principal and department lead. And we go over staffing, expenditures, academic services, ops plans, goals, as well as these things are actually, so as well as receiving feedback from TLTs and SLTs throughout the process, and that is how they're able to take part and give their feedback in terms of goals and regarding the budget, the calendar, and goal development as well with the principals. And after those are completed and we have those meetings, we are able to make decisions using our district priorities as our guide on decisions that are made for our budget for next year. Our funding sources. So our 2 major funding sources are the City of Lawrence, which is recommended and approved by recommended by the mayor and subsequently approved by City Council. And this budget is often referred to as our local budget. And then our second funding source, major funding source, are state and local grants, which is usually formula based off of our population, and those are referred to our entitlement grants. And then there are some other grants that we receive on a competitive basis. Our steps to determining state aid. So Chapter 70 is a state aid formula that defines and calculates each community's foundation budget, which is the adequate funding level for each district based off specific grades, program, demographic characteristics of its students. It determines an equitable local contribution, which is also how much of our foundation budget should be paid by the city or the town. And the remainder is funded by Chapter 70 aid. So this slide actually shows you how the net school spending formula is. It is the local contribution plus the state aid equals our net school spending requirement, which is the minimum amount that the district must spend to comply with state law. This next slide gives you some historical information in regards to how much Chapter 70 we have received and also our city contribution. And in the following slide, I go into more detail. Oh, I'm sorry that it came up unaligned for you on the one you're seeing on the screen. But this year, we are set to receive from Chapter 78 approximately $240 million, of which we are allowed to deduct tuition and charter, leaving us with a net Chapter 78 of $211 million. The required city contribution is approximately $13 million, of which we are allowed to deduct some qualifying city expenses of approximately $4.5 million, which brings our net city contribution to $8.4 million. Additionally, added into our budget are some non-qualifying costs for net school spending, which are transportation, adult education, and our building leases. Those total to about $10.8 million, and brings our total school budget to $230.7 million. The Student Opportunity Act. So the Student Opportunity Act allowed for an unprecedented $1.5 billion investment into Massachusetts public schools. All districts were required to submit a 3-year plan, which we did and received approval for, and is posted on the DESE website as well as the Lawrence Public Schools website. And for our school year 22-23, we are expected to receive $17.7 million in SOA funding. So how does LPS fund schools? So schools do have school-based autonomy, which means the schools have the ability to create staffing and move funds from one account to the other, as long as they stay within their allocation. Staffing. We provide funding to our schools to cover costs of salary increases, and we level fund all non-salary budgets. What is funded in a budget? All existing staff positions, programs, enrichments, athletics, extended day. We level fund school instructional and operational materials, and then all costs of increased health insurance, dental insurance, and other employee benefits. This slide gives a refresher of our budget priorities, which you're familiar with. We have our budget priorities in student achievement, to provide equitable and standard-aligned curricula and instruction for all students. Support services, expand continuum of academic and social and emotional mental health support, and particularly for our at-risk students. Grow a culturally responsible workforce, to deepen efforts to recruit, retain, and train culturally responsive, highly effective teaching and professional staff. And deepen our family and student partnerships, to expand ways in which the district engages families and students, to grow family and engagement, to build partnerships in service of our student success in areas of attendance, academic, and holistic development. And then in this slide, we intend to provide an update on ESSER 2. So we did receive about $24 million of ESSER money, of which 36% is encumbered in the breakdown that you see in front of you now. 18.4% went to supplies and materials, So identified curriculum needs, HVAC boiler technology, PPE needs, and SEL supports. And the next biggest category where we have encumbered thus far is contracted services, so PD, coaching, regional partnerships, enrichment, and translation services. And I open it up for questions.
All right, thank you. Start with Jess.
Can you just remind us what encumbered means?
Sure. So encumbered is probably equal to accruing. So it's something that we know we're going to spend.
Okay.
And so we kind of reserve the funding is the best way I can explain it. So if we, for example, salaries is the biggest thing we encumber at the beginning of the year. So we go ahead and we encumber it, and that's it. It's kind of taken out of the budget and set aside. We can't spend it. We can't touch it. It is set for that only.
Okay, so can you just go back to the slide where it's like the percent encumbered?
Sure. So that would be the last slide. Yep.
Right. So what is the implication for I'll just choose one. So the instructional and professional salaries and fringe benefits. What is the implication? What does it mean to, so if only 4.6% of it is encumbered, right? That's saying that of what's available in that line item, we know we're going to spend 4.6% of it.
You got it.
So there's 90, whatever's budgeted in that line item, there's 95% of it we don't know how we're going to spend yet?
Correct, and that a lot has to do with that particular line with vacancies that currently still exist.
Okay, and is that because we are still trying to hire a lot of people and we don't know exactly what the expense is going to be, or?
So I think it's a combination of both. So it's vacancies and also the fact that we are still spending, we did still spend some of ESSER 1 at the beginning of this school year. So I do want to remind that we have ESSER 1, 2, and 3 that's overlap each other.
Okay, so this is ESSER 2.
Correct.
And so it's basically saying that there's a lot that we still haven't figured out about ESSER 2 and how we're going to spend it.
Well, I don't know that I would say that we haven't figured out, more so that we just haven't got to encumber or spend quite at this moment.
Okay, so we have a plan for how we're going to spend it, but we just haven't, we're not able to say definitively that that's happening.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Correct. So
Now-
we are forced to submit plans for all 3 ESSERs that need to be approved.
Okay,
So everything has a plan. Now, whether we submit an amendment to adjust along the way, obviously has to happen sometimes, but for the most part, it all was already planned and approved by DESE.
okay. One thing that would be awesome to have in this table is to know what the total amount is per line item for each of these things. Because I believe we've talked and we've had discussion at several meetings in the past about, and I know there are many different feelings about this. We've gone back and forth on this, but, spending some of that ESSER money on stipends, in particular, to help compensate people for extraordinary duty and extraordinary times. And I would just love to know what the total amount is under each of those line items. That'd be helpful.
Sure, I can provide that for you.
Okay, awesome. And then can you go back to, back, yes, there. So this $29 million, that's about tuition, charter, and choice. Can you just break that down for us a little bit more? Like, where is that going? Is that going to the, EMOs in the district? Is that going to other districts? Is that going to SPED accommodations? Where is that stuff going?
Sure, so that's for our students who choice out. So whether they choice out to a charter or they choice out of district.
Okay,
And that does include SPED students that do need to go to other districts or to other cities to be able to receive the appropriate services.
okay. Is it possible as we go further into this process, clearly not tonight, just to understand sort of the major categories, how much of that 29 million is going to what, so that we just understand where I don't mean leaking money, because I understand that this is because we have to pay for some of these things if people make certain choices around where they're sending kids to school or services that they need or so on, but it would just be helpful to understand where that, a little more detail on where that's going.
Sure, and I can actually provide that. I have those numbers now if you'd like.
Oh, yeah,
Because
that'd be
they are
awesome.
actually an estimate. I do want to caution with that.
Okay.
That they are an estimate based off the governor's budget that was just released. So these numbers are subject to change once they become actuals. But for school choice and sending tuition, it's $584,000. For charter, it's about 32.8 million. And special ed is about 57,000. And then
That
there
adds
is-
up to more than 29 million.
Because there's also tuition reimbursement that we do receive back from the state as well, that's
I
netted out
see.
of that, which is
Okay.
about 5.8.
Okay. And is that charter money, like, is that all going to, like, is it all going to family development and community day and up, or or is it going to others too?
Yeah, I can distinguish that. So the charters that are not in district.
Oh, okay.
As an example, Community Day is not in district.
Okay,
As an example, Phoenix is
Yeah.
not in district.
gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent.
I think that's all my questions at this point, Ventura. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Pat?
Yes, can we go back to the Lawrence Net School spending requirements, that chart?
So one more back, if you
With the
can.
columns?
Yep.
All right, has the city met that requirement for those years?
They have. They've met the requirement definitely as far back as FY19. I don't know, Superintendent, if you can be back from that.
Yeah, for sure. So in our tenure together as a board and team, they have met their net school spending. So
Okay.
we're very pleased with our partners.
All right, and the next slide, please, Ms. Sale. All right, the transportation, adult ed, and building leases, is that a responsibility of the city?
Yes.
Okay. And what is less city qualifying? Is that a subtraction of, no, it isn't. What's less city qualifying expenses?
It is a subtraction of the required city contribution that is allowable, and it's for admin costs, emergency employee benefits, snow and sanding, and other DPW operational maintenance that they are allowed to charge back and out
Okay.
of their contribution.
And then just that ESER 2 chart, I agree with Jess. It would help if we knew how much of that money in ESER 2 is allocated to each one of these categories, specifically building maintenance. Do you know off the top of your head what percentage of the ESER 2 is supposed to go to building maintenance?
I do not know off the top of my head what the final percentage is. I can definitely get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
But I can give you a breakdown, like dollar amount if you'd like, for every single category. You'd like that now? Sure. So instructional and professional salaries and fringe, it's about $1.1 million. Stipends, about $249,000. Contracted services, about $1.9 million. Supplies and materials, about $4.4. Under other or miscellaneous, about $15,000. And then the monies for capital improvements that were added to this will not be available, became available in July, but we're still going through the process of having that approved also. No, not at the moment. I can get that for you, though.
I'm all set, thank you.
Sure. I'm sorry?
Sorry. That doesn't add up to $24 million.
It wouldn't. It's meant to add up to the 36% that we've encumbered already.
Ah, okay.
For the
Okay.
budgeted dollar amounts, I'd
Yeah.
have to get that.
That's what, yeah, okay, that's.
I
the number
apologize,
that
I
think
misunderstood.
Pat and I Are, yeah, asking for, okay.
Sure. So just to clarify, the percentages that you see in front of you are what's encumbered.
Okay.
So the dollar amounts I just gave you are associated to the percentages of what's encumbered,
Right,
not budgeted.
right. So what we want to see is what's budgeted in each
Perfect.
of those line items.
Yep. So I can provide that.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Domeli?
So based on this chart right here, can you give me an example of how this supports students, like,
How this supports students?
yeah, like what kind of supports we'll see for students in terms of this?
Sure. So I think the support for students and what you're seeing here is probably not as a direct impact. And Superintendent, you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yep, I can chime in. So I
Sure.
think specifically, student-facing supports are those that you would see on the top where it says salaries and fringes. And so when you see those acronyms up there, BCBAs and BBEs, nurses and et cetera, those are like the people in your classrooms, the people in the buildings, the people's in the office. The BCBAs, for example, every single school receive additional BCBAs, and these folks are invaluable to supporting students who need additional supports. BBEs, we call those building-based educators. Every single school also received an additional building-based educator. Those are examples of how they are directly correlated to student-facing supports.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question. If you can go back to a slide, it was about what was funded for the students. It related to something like sports and, no, yeah, I think it's this one.
And intramurals, I believe, was
Yep, that's the
enrichment,
one.
intramurals, athletics, and extended day.
Yes. Okay. I guess my question is when will we see things like the arts program and the music program also being funded?
That's an excellent question, Domeli. So the way that would work is that when we have school planning meetings, an example for the high school means staff will think through what are the new programs and initiatives that they want to see specific to the arts, specific to music, specific to all the other enrichment. And then they'll say, you know, what we need is an additional drum set times 5. I don't know, I'm making that up. Or what we need is that every student has the following materials. Or that every single student has the experience of going to a play live in New York. I'm making that up, Domelis. Don't get ideas. But those are examples of how your teachers and your administrators will advocate for what you all have said you would like to experience. So as a student, I encourage you to go back to your teachers and say, you know what would be great if we had X, Y, and Z.
And
then
get
that
all
would be
your friends
reflected.
to say it too.
And say it to your friends also, that's right. That's right, yeah.
Petition kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I would, so the question was via petition, which way? You know, think about your student council, your government council, think about the cabinets, think about what are the structures that already exist that you guys meet with your teachers and administrators, and like, you know, we've been thinking about the following.
Yeah.
And they can help you design ways to then share that information with your peers.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Julio?
Thanks. Thank you for the presentation. I'm sure this is just an update. I'm sure that when we do get the actual budget, we will have, similar to what we've had in the previous years, the amount that were allocated previously versus the amounts and the percentages. So I'm fine with the information you've provided, because I'm sure we're going to get all of that information, especially since we've been doing this now for 4 years.
Yes.
And that was something that we requested at the beginning, and that has been consistently done. So I'm all set. I don't have any questions right now.
Great, thank you. I do have some questions. One of them is the SOA dollars of 17 million.
Yes.
Is that already reflected in the net school spending?
Yes, it is.
So the Chapter 70 aid that's listed there already includes the 17.8 or 7 million.
Correct.
Cool. I just want to clarify that because since it came on a separate slide, I want to make sure folks don't think it's additional 17 million, that it's already there. Okay.
I appreciate
Yeah,
that, yes.
okay. How much, if you have this roughly, like, of our FY23 budget, by how much will it increase just to meet contractual obligations?
Sure. So that's actually something that we're in the process of going through at the moment. So part of what I've been working with in the past about week and a half is meeting with every single one of our principals to go through a lot of those items. So those are things that I'll be able to answer to during the hearings. Right now, it's a little bit too preliminary for me to be able to respond to that.
Okay, that makes sense. Some of these questions may be like that, like just to sort of throw them out there, but, you know, we can take them up when it makes sense. Let's see. A couple ESSER-related questions. So I think, you know, as a lot of my colleagues has already said with the ESSER 2, I think the breakdown, everything everyone said, like, I agree with, so I'm not going to repeat that. But one thing that might be helpful, this is the kind of thing that I know you all have presented this to us, and it's the kind of thing where you're going to have to present it, like, every single time you talk about the budget, just so it stays, like, fresh. Things like the timeline for the different ESSERs, like ESSER 2 ends in FY23 is the last year we can encumber, is that right?
Correct. And
then 3 is FY24 is the last year. So just, I think it's going to have to be something that every single time I think you're talking to us about the budget, it would be helpful to remind us of things like that, like the timelines and how these things overlap. And even the comments you made were helpful about some of the ESSER 2, you know, encumbrances are low because we actually had ESSER 1, you know, to sort of that period. So I just asked, I don't feel like you are being repetitive. I think it just helps us always be reminded of, especially with ESSER, that is such an important, you know, sort of investment right now for us. So it would just be super helpful to keep doing that. Can you talk a little bit about what's the process to revise plans? So as you mentioned with some of these, we put our best thinking forward without, I mean, you know, things change. Like, let's put it that way. Some things out of our control, things like that. So what's the process like with ESSER 2, for example, to make revisions to the plan officially to DESE, what's required, timelines, if we're finding that, like, some of our original budget just doesn't make sense, we need to shift some of that funding, like, what's that process look like?
Sure. So the process begins internally by addressing the fact that a new need has come up. And then afterwards, we file amendment reports where we say what we're not doing and what we are doing instead, and that gets approved then afterwards once we provide it to DESE. So part of what will likely happen now is we'll go through our budget process, we'll receive feedback from the principals, from all the department leads, and we'll assess that against what was already budgeted and see if there needs to be any shifting, and then an amendment would then be created and submitted for approval.
Great. And then remind us, because we're talking about ESSER 2 spend right now, and then there's ESSER 3, which I know has a further year, you know, sort of that we can, so is it sort of accurate to say that because we're still sort of focusing on ESSER 2, which makes sense, it's the funding we have, we want to spend it, we might need to align that, we do have a plan for ESSER 3, clearly, we've seen it, like, you know, it's posted, but is that, how do I ask this? I mean, we're mostly focusing on ESSER 2 right now. I mean, as we're thinking about where to draw down funds from and things like that, which means that ESSER 3, while we have a plan for it, like, we don't need to right now be thinking about encumbering those funds as much as we're focusing on ESSER 2, or is the idea that we're going to start into the next fiscal year also starting to encumber, we think, from ESSER 3?
So I believe your assumption is correct. We are focusing on ESSER 2 right now, as we finished with ESSER 1 and moved on to ESSER 2. And then once we fully spend down ESSER 2, then we'd move on to ESSER 3.
Yep. Yeah, and that makes total sense. We don't want to leave any money on the table, so I think that makes sense. I would also say that as you all are continuing to refine, and first of all, I think it's actually a good thing, you know, that there's this opportunity to revise, because again, it's not just us. I think everyone put these plans together And then there are a lot of things we didn't anticipate, like such difficulty filling, some positions, because I think a lot of ESSER plans identified staffing, right, as the way to and then we're running into challenges. So we're going to have to think about how we revise the plans. So I think it's good. I think it makes sense. I just think also FY24 seems like a long way away, but I know it's not, and so the more that you all are adjusting ESSER 2 and then thinking about implications for ESSER 3 and then bringing that to us so we're aware and sort of clear on how you're thinking about that, I think will just continue to be really helpful. Because I know it's not static, right? It's going to keep evolving. So the more we're just involved and aware of that, I think it's going to be really important.
Sure, we can incorporate that part of our budget hearing presentations.
Awesome. And then two things which I think are going to be more for later as we get deeper into the budget, but I'm going to go ahead and ask them now. Slide 3. Make sure it's the right one.
Budget review and departments by school.
Yeah. Oftentimes when I sort of work with districts or think about, sort of where I hear feedback during the budgeting process where it's, I think, super clear in terms of the steps. That last bullet is where oftentimes, it's sort of then the decisions are made. You know what I mean? Can you just talk to us a little bit about what that looks like those decisions? So I know we have priorities for our budget, and schools, TLT schools are able to put together their plans as it relates to all these dimensions of staffing, expenditures, things like that. And they're, ideally looking at the priorities for the budget so that they're using that as guidance to sort of propose new things and things like that. Once that's all done, can you just remind, what happens? This last bullet of decisions are then made, just clarify for us, who makes those decisions? Just what does that look like in practice? And what does that work look like? That sort of decision-making, looking across the school's sort of desired, budgets, and then the hard work you all have to do to actually figure out, what can we do based on resources and priorities, things like that. And I guess I'll open it to both of you, but just to, I think a little now, but I think it's going to probably be a question we're going to come back to, because as I work with districts, that becomes a place when people oftentimes don't understand how those decisions are made, and it could lead to wait, why did you get something and I didn't? So I just want to clarify, how do we do that work?
Yeah, I got this, Ms. Maciel. So if you can envision each school team comes forth with very thoughtful rationales and goals that are aligned to both district, my goals, turnaround. And in these meetings, they're strong advocates for specific resources, time and people, money, to then support those goals. An example of what happens once they leave the table, we've taken very copious notes. They leave us with their desire, either FTE structure, additional resources, materials, whatever the tangible is. The supervisor who works with that school very intimately, along with the entire team who has the knowledge, then says, yes, based on the request for an FTE for an additional interventionist for the kindergarten cohort, we've seen their MAP scores, we've seen their DIBELs, we've seen everything, that makes sense. And we can see how that short-term infusion intervention of that FTE is very appropriate. That's one example. We also have copious notes from years before, and we know what's been happening across the district with every single school, because we keep track of that. So it's why the team is so large when they come forth, because everyone has a piece of the story, and then they're just reminding us of where they are in their continuum to make progress with those goals. There's always this question of equity. We're very mindful of that. There's always this issue of is it because Principal Ventura versus Principal Pat is our stronger advocate, or she's friends with Maciel versus friends with the other ones? So we take that off the table. And I think the process is why it's so long, to ensure that every school gets what they need.
Great. And my final question would be, and that's super helpful, thank you. And my final question would be around, just given the reality of ESSER, 2 and then 3 and the SOA investment, I think, there's a perception, right, like that we're swimming in money as a district. When I think, we have additional investment, we also have a lot of need, and we've already mapped sort of how to spend those dollars to support that need. But if I'm a principal and if I'm a member of the TLT, like, am I being encouraged to sort of propose above and beyond what I might typically propose? If I'm a principal who tries to be cautious and respectful of that, there's this, I'm not going to get tons. Is this a year when we're asking principals and TLTs to like really give us a more robust, perhaps, or more expensive plan, or like just how are we approaching that? I'm just curious, given again, the additional investment of resources.
For sure. So the principals are well aware of the additional funding, and they're very mindful that the infusion is short-term. With that understanding, they know what they can be able to fund, if you would, with a short investment. They also understand that there will be many instances where the request is to add an FTE, and they will have to make the very difficult decision of not having that FTE in 2 years' time. So for those reasons, we highly encourage that they do not come forth with, like, I would like another 5 staff members. In fact, we will not allow that. It's not permissible, because then how do we afford them 2 years' time? And so I can anticipate that they will not do that they will be quite thoughtful about how and what they request, and that when they do come forth with additional FTE requests, that they understand it's because it's necessary in this time period.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
Okay. So if you look, though, at the, like, net school spending chart, like, our total school budget is increasing, right? Partly because SOA is providing a more, like, SOA is not ESSER. ESSER is
Correct.
short-term funding.
Correct.
SOA is a new addition to the budget, right? Is there room for instance, things like, pay, like more permanent pay increases for paraeducators, or some modest increase in staffing that we could seed with ESSER, but that could be absorbed by the addition of SOA into the budget?
Yeah, and just before you, I mean, it's a good question, and partly I think why I asked, like, what is the cost just to maintain status quo in terms of contractual? Because my guess is that, I don't know the percentage, but it's going to be a healthy percentage just to keep the current level of staff, because everything sort of increases with health in another year. And like, so I think, as I heard, like, you all are figuring out that information. I think that'll be really important to be able to answer this question, because if we're seeing that to sustain just our current level of staffing, it's going to cost us 12 million, 13 million, I'm making that up, but then I think it leaves us with, like, okay, so how much would we have potentially that is more sustainable, not just next year, but then we got to, like, project that out over, future years as well. So I think that information will be really helpful to answer that question that you're raising, Jess.
And I'll just add that the plan for SOA that we all decided on as a community was heavily on additional FTEs. Had we say, let's not hire any more additional supports, and let's use that towards something else, we could have done that, but we didn't. So we've already hired forth the additional BCBAs, the counselors, the social worker, the additional interventionist, you see? And so it's one or the other in this moment.
So those additional physicians are already factored
Correct.
into the, okay. All right.
Correct.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the work to date and, the budget hearings. I know the budget subcommittee, but yeah, just appreciate it. And obviously, there's a lot of interest in the board, so please don't ever feel like you're sharing too much, or like we want to hear it all. So please look forward to hearing from you all soon.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. And then the last item on.
Could I just
Oh,
ask
yeah,
one
please.
more question?
Yep.
But I guess one other possibility, right? If we're looking for other ways to fund things like increases to para wages, I'm just using that as an example. Like, could the city contribute more money to the school budget if the city deemed that it could afford that?
Let me ask it another way. There's nothing that prevents the city from contributing more than the required local contribution, correct?
You're correct.
Okay, just curious. Thanks.
All right, and the final agenda item on the superintendent's reports, the human resources follow-up.
Hello again. So now it's time for human resources. And I think we're missing something there. So on slide number 2, last time I was here, last month, there were quite a few questions regarding pre and current turnaround plan when it comes to our staffing numbers and comparison of salaries, comparison of resignations and exit interviews, and so I'm coming to you with that information that you requested. This chart right here shows us where we were as far as number of teachers and number of students. Pre-turnaround plan in 2010, we had about 928 teachers and 12,284 students. Fast forward to 2021, we have 1,123 teachers, which is an increase of 21%, and 12,842 students, which is an increase of 5%. Could you go back? Slide number 3. I want to make sure that you see what the district comparison is with our local districts. It was specifically asked. So this is the student to teacher ratio. So with that increase of 20% in number of teachers since pre-turnaround plan, that actually reduces our student to teacher ratio down to 11.4. In comparison to Lowell at 12.8, Haverhill at 13.1, and Methuen at 13.2. This chart right here is your teacher retention rate since pre-turnaround plan through current. In 2009, 2 years before the turnaround plan, our retention rate was 91.4%. At turnaround plan was 87%, and currently, if you scroll over all the way to 2021, we are at 87.3%. That's a difference of 4.1% from pre-turnaround plan. Here's a comparison by districts. So you would see Lawrence, Methuen, Haverhill, and Lowell. In 2009, we were all hovering between 82 and 91%. And over the years, we're now here at 2021, we are back at hovering around the same between 87 and 91%, a little higher, actually. Here's a comparison of the starting salary for teachers by community. Lowell at $45,949, Lawrence at $46,000, followed by Methuen at $47,473, and Haverhill at $51,031. This is a district comparison of current average salary. Lawrence is at $69,596. Followed by Haverhill at $74,287, Lowell at $78,200, and Methuen at $78,476. I wanted to update you. Last time I was here, I updated you through December's resignations. This is through January's resignations. We increased from 45 teachers that resigned to 51. We have filled those positions, but I just wanted to give you the pattern that's been presenting since October. So we're currently still at about 30% of the teachers that have resigned are from middle school, as well as high school, and 42% from the elementary schools. This next slide is our exit survey data from July 2021 to present. So you saw in the previous slide that we had 117 resignations. As of, I believe, July 2021, we've actually had a total of 133 resignations, but only 33 individuals responded to the exit survey. So it's a very small percentage. As a result, we have created a teacher diversification professional learning community that includes teachers, administrators, and central office staff. Have recreated the survey for it to be an online survey and one that is much more data-driven. So if you look at this, the survey results, you see that those areas that received over 75% of satisfaction are in job matching and cooperative colleagues and job satisfaction. The areas that received the less number of satisfaction is your fair salary and reasonable workload. Again, that's 33 individuals. There was also a question about what our recruitment retention strategy will be given this context. In the Human Resources Department, we're about to disseminate a declaration of intent, which is an anonymous survey that goes out to all staff in March after the school planning meetings. This is where individuals anonymously provide us information as to what their intent is in remaining in LPS and what's factoring their decision for that intent. That information is helpful for us to then target specific either grade level or content teachers or special ed or ESL teachers if we feel that there's, the data is reflecting that we will have much higher resignation in those areas. We'll be implementing a talent and recruitment management system. We currently have an RFP out, and we're reviewing the proposals. Whichever management system we choose would include a recruitment strategy along with an online posting plan that specifically attracts diverse educators and develops a recruitment message aligned to our vision for student experience and the portrait of a graduate. In addition, we're going to still continue to develop our homegrown initiative through the DESE Teacher Diversification Grant in partnership with Northern Essex Community College and Regis College to support bilingual, bicultural paraprofessionals to become fully licensed educators through tuition reimbursement, student loan assistance, MTEL prep, and licensure case management. In addition, we'll be supporting high school students to begin training towards careers in education with preparation for parapro tests, passing, and completion. And what I did not note there is also a paid internship opportunity by working with collaborative community-based organizations that serve young students after school. So that is my update for HR. Any questions?
Great, thank you. I believe we're starting with Jess.
Can you go back to that slide about the ratio?
Sure. Should be slide 3.
Yeah, I just don't, like, how is this getting calculated? Because, like, there's not a classroom that I know of in Lawrence that has, like, 11 students in it for a teacher.
Right, so that's calculated with also special ed and ESL teachers who have smaller groups.
Okay,
So the small groups, maybe a special ed teacher would have 8 students,
yep,
right? And then their colleague has a classroom of 20. You average that together and you get about 11.
okay. And
So the
that-
number of educators we have in specialized programs matters.
Okay, but and when we say student to teacher, but this is only calculated on like fully fledged, fully licensed teachers. It's not, is it putting paras into the mix or?
No,
Yeah.
that's
okay.
not yet inclusive of paras.
Okay, so it's just, okay, all right. And then, can you move it forward a couple, I'll tell you when to stop. Yeah, so, like these two.
Yeah.
So, I'm just trying to understand, right? Like, it seems like we've definitely, in the public participation and public comment sections of our meetings, like, this year, more than any other year over the past 4 years, we've heard a lot about teachers leaving the system, right? And that's also been national news and so on. But the statistics are telling us that our retention rate over the last 2 years is actually higher, right?
Yep.
So what is that about?
Because as they're leaving, they're also being hired. So it's not that they're leaving and they're not getting filled, those positions. They get filled, and some stay, and some leave again. So the
Wait,
fact of the matter is that the teachers are shopping around different districts. And if they're not happy, because there's still choices out there to apply for positions in other districts, then they try another district out.
So I don't understand what this is measuring then. Like, the way I'm reading it is like that in 2017, 70% of the teachers that we had 75% of the teachers that we had in 2016 returned in 2017,
Correct.
right? But here, just in the Lawrence School District.
Correct.
Right, but we didn't hear any outcry that year about teacher retention and et cetera. And now we're saying that in 2021, a little over 87% of the teachers that we had in 2020 stayed with us in 2021, yes?
Yes.
So it's higher. We've retained more teachers this year than we have in many past years.
Yes, and we've increased number of staffing. And what's the revolving door of the teachers is that like 10 to 15% that don't stay.
I'll also give you an example. I got an email actually from a district, I won't name them. The district said, one of your staff member wants to return. Can I please keep this staff member until at least the February break? Because they went to a different district, didn't like it, and now they're back.
Okay,
And it happened within the same year,
right.
as an example. Of
Okay.
course, I told my colleague, Alex, no problem, let's make it a smooth transition.
Right.
So this particular staff member, and it's not uncommon for them to do that.
Okay, so people are if someone leaves mid-year, goes to a different district, and then comes back, they're considered still retained.
No, it depends
Not considered,
it depends who owns them for October 1st of the following year in the SIMS data.
Okay.
So if you were hired before October 1st and you're still in that district the following October 1st, you're retained.
Okay, so you could be hired before October 1st. Let's say you resign in December. You go work for Westford or something, I don't know. And then you decide you don't like it. You come back to us in April and you're still with us in October. You're considered retained.
Yes.
Okay. So we do have teachers who have left who are coming back.
Yes.
And the example that I just gave you today.
Okay. All right, I'm just trying to understand that. Okay.
I mean, it's also, it's an employee market, and employers are trying to woo employees into sectors that people may have not even ventured off into, because they're offering, some things that may look appealing in the moment. For example, a different quality of life, right? Staying home 3 days a week, right? Working from home and only going into the office 2 days a week.
Yeah.
That's appealing to someone who's trying to maneuver childcare and doesn't want to expose their kid too much to too many different places because of COVID. There's all these life dynamics.
Yeah.
I strongly believe that at the end of the day, folks that go into teaching go into it because they honestly like and love human connection.
Yeah.
And so they will miss it and they will return.
Okay.
And it's also true that when they do explore another district for whatever reason, including pay, including different hours, they're like, it's not for me. I want to go back.
Right.
In this example, now that I'm repeating myself, I asked my colleague, I'm like, what's happening? Did something happen? Like, no, they just want to go back to you. I'm like, okay.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay, so then can we go to the exit survey slide?
Sure.
So it seems like there's these like major things that are calling out to us, right? Or, I mean, pay is huge, and I do think it's worth a larger conversation about how we, as a relatively resource-poor city, like, compete in that, right? Because there seem to be limited options, I'm assuming that maybe some of those other cities have a larger property tax base, they're contributing more to their school system. That's where some of the extra money is coming from to be more competitive. And,
Yes.
I'm just not sure exactly what we do about that other than, work on economic development outside of
Correct.
this context, right? But there's other big areas for improvement, right? Around like good working conditions, reasonable workload, the amount of support that we're receiving. Like, is it possible, or maybe HR is doing this already, I'd love to know about it. Like, can we do some focus groups with teachers around those issues and say, like, we're hearing that the people who are at least responding to the exit surveys, like, there's themes that are emerging. So what is it that would constitute more adequate support for teachers, or better working conditions, or, a more reasonable workload? And I understand that in some cases there's things that we come up against that we can't change or move, but it does feel like with some teacher input, we should be able to make some changes around some of those things, no? I'm just opening this up for discussion.
This brings up, why we've been wanting to come to the table and negotiate with our colleagues so we can offer a better, fair salary. And, a lot of folks who've left, this is since July 2001, weren't here when we hired all the BCBAs and additional CNAs and additional staff that could have impacted how they felt about their workload. And those were specific targeted supports because we know that teachers were extending themselves, and even though they were offering their heart and soul to support students with higher needs in their classroom, that additional support was necessary in order for A, number one, the student to learn, and B, for the teacher to really differentiate for all students, right? Not just the ones that kind of rise to the top. So I think it's a balancing act, but we're eager to have these conversations, and I think we're in a really good position to come to a negotiated agreement that makes the most sense given the economic context of the city.
Just your mic, sir.
I'm sorry. I was asking, these are conversations that we have to have through the medium of negotiating with the teachers union, and we can't have them outside of that process.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for
You're welcome.
clarifying.
All right, Pat?
Yes, could you go to the slide with the salary comparisons, please?
8. Average or starting?
Oh, there's another one. Right there. So we're looking at 2 out of 4 districts that are higher than the Lawrence teachers, correct?
Correct.
And 1 that's a little bit lower. I mean, that speaks volumes to me, that we probably need to be a little bit more competitive as far as our salaries go, so we won't be losing teachers. Do you have a similar chart with the para salaries?
Not as of yet. My priority right now, because we are just about to we just started our first meeting with the teachers, and our para conversation is going to start happening more later on in March. But it's the comparison that I am doing with each of our collective bargaining groups, is looking what's happening across other districts.
So do you know where our para salaries would rank in a similar chart?
Not off the top of my head right now. I haven't analyzed it, but it is data that I'm pulling.
Okay. That would be interesting to see, as well as this one, to see where we stand when we look at other districts and if we're losing people to other districts because the salary structure is a lot more.
Yes, and in addition, the districts have already negotiated contracts for beyond these years.
Okay.
So they're farther along, and we're not. So,
All right.
Because our contract ended in 2020. So these districts have already negotiated through 2022 or 2023.
So is there any way you could give us a chart that would say that? Like the different districts that have negotiated their contracts and where we stand, the same thing for the paras too?
Yep, I can give you that, and I can also tell you right now. So Haverhill's contract with the teachers is through 2022. Lowell just did a MOU through 2020, so there's 2017 to 2020, and Methuen just finished theirs for 2021.
Okay.
I could do the same for the paras.
That would be great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Domeni?
I'm all set.
Great. Julio?
Thank you. I just have a couple of comments based on questions that Jess raised and on the charts. The retention, the teachers' retention rate, it's a little bit confusing because there has to be some type of a criteria to go back to retention. If I'm looking at that and I'm looking at a business situation, the retention rate does not include new hires. It would only include the people that you've had for a certain amount of years or time. So that is a little bit confusing, especially when we started the year thinking that we had lost so many teachers, and then all of a sudden we've gained more back. So it's a little bit confusing, but if that's the way that has been done across the board, I don't have an issue with it, but it's just a little bit not as clear as it should be. The other comment that I'm going to make is that the only thing that can be done in terms of the salaries adjustments here would probably have to come from the state to ask the city to increase their percentage of contribution based on the new growth of tax properties in the city. The city has heavily depended a lot from the state because of the conditions that we were in for many years. But as of now, with all the new construction and all the new buildings, all of that should be changing. And hopefully, I don't think we as a board can ask the city to do that, but I believe the state can ask the city to do that. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of comments and questions have been asked. I think, just one thing about that, that data on retention, it's actually, I work with several districts across the country where we see very similar data, that retention over the last 2 years has actually been pretty high for teachers and others. And it's hard because we're trying to sort of wrap my head around like the narrative and what the data is showing us. And, I don't know, I guess I'm just sort of guessing at it. But I think, the last couple of years have been just really hard, so even if people haven't been, leaving, I think, in the numbers that we would think. I mean, I think the narrative is out there, and I think it's just been really hard for people, But it's just something that I think as we, sort of keep moving forward, I think it's going to be important, not just for us, but as we're looking back at this period, just what that story of retention really is. Because again, I'm seeing these kind of patterns in districts across the country, not just here. The other thing I would say is that there's a pretty established research base on teacher satisfaction or sort of why teachers stay or leave, and I think salary is actually pretty low on that list. It's important, but it's not even looking at the retention data, it's not like the only reason. I think a lot of it is around perceptions of agency, to impact decisions at the school and support, and so there's a lot there. So I would just say that to the degree that you all are leveraging that research base just to inform, sort of the actions in addition to salary, I think is always just really helpful. Yeah, there's just a lot there. I mean, I think that I would be, there's just a lot of staffing information that I have a lot of questions around, and I actually think it's I think it actually is more than just I would feel comfortable asking staff to take on, because I'm really interested in looking at a lot of this data by different levels of experience, for example. Are we seeing the same type of retention by that, different demographic factors? Are we thinking about our salary scale? I see the starting and average, but what does it look like for, at different, periods of our current model? I mean, there's just a lot that I know you all are probably looking at, and I think will be important as we think about retention, not just as a whole, but I think we want to obviously retain all our staff, but it's, as we think about differentiated roles and teachers with more experience are then supporting less experienced teachers, there's a strategy behind there that you all are probably looking at that, at some point would be helpful to unpack, and I'm not sure how helpful that is to do it right now. And I know I'm the one asking the sort of question and making the comments, but it's sort of that sort of line of inquiry.
Well, it's the work that we're doing with the teacher diversification professional learning community with DESE that we are attending monthly sessions on, and we just met right before I came into this meeting, and as a result of that group, that's why we've fleshed out this exit survey to be much more comprehensive, to be able to get down to what are those factors that contribute to good working conditions, so they can identify what those factors are, and where they're not happening, how do we support those areas or those schools or those locations or those departments or smart learning communities to have those type of working conditions and or workload. But just looking at what data we're collecting and disaggregating the data by the subgroups, I will say that the digging further into data has been helpful to get a good picture. I know this retention data, because I compared it across district, I didn't provide a comprehensive retention data of the district about who's leaving and who's staying and percentage based on years of service, and what percentage of those are advanced educators and master educators or expert educators. But what I will say is that, there was a sense of urgency in the beginning of the school year around hires. And when I would pull the data and present it to you and I compared it to the previous years, it was the same. So I think folks were definitely feeling the brunt of staff being out for different medical reasons, as well as lack of access to building-based educators and long-term subs, that part of our workforce had other options given all the rest of the sectors and what they are struggling with in keeping employees as well. So, and they play a major role in the school function and relieving teachers and covering for teachers when they're absent. So, I think it's just like all these forces came at one time and felt a lot bigger than the actual numbers that we're presenting. But I still think that looking at that 15% and understanding where that 15% is going and why and who they are is important if we want to build a consistent workforce that's going to meet the needs of our students.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate that analysis too, because it's kind of perplexing, right? Like on the one hand, but you're right, there is so much that's been happening that is not necessarily related to attrition or retention, but just people had to be out, like for, sort of different reasons. So I really appreciate that. Okay, that's all I have. I don't know if there are any further questions. If not, I will move us on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's fine. The final thing I would say, or just on our agenda, is approval of the January 9th, 2022 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second for discussion.
Discussion?
Okay, great. We're open for discussion. Go ahead, Leanne.
I read the minutes, but I'm not quite sure. I'm just looking here, and I think the date on here on the agenda is wrong. It has January 9th, should be January 12th, but I'm not sure if this is reflected on the actual minutes. So just to make sure that that is corrected, if it is.
Thank you. And then Pat?
Yes, on page 3, about halfway down, my comment was, how are we covering the classrooms rather than convening? Thank you.
Great, so we'll make those two edits. Any further discussion? Okay, so I will, the vote will include those amendments. All right, so Jess?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So those are passed. So, all right, we ended the agenda, and I know you wanted to...
Yes, thank you, Ventura. I would just like to remind members of the LAE Board that on Tuesday, February 15th, the LAE School, there'll be a public hearing at the City Council meeting about the LAE School. And I feel it'd be incumbent upon us as a board to attend that meeting and show our support for the LAE School. We're at the final chance here to get this vote and submit it to the MSBA before February 24th. So I would really appreciate it if we could all attend that meeting. And I thank you.
I will be there, Pat.
Thank you.
Great. And then the final thing I just want to read is an order that has been sort of publicly stated coming from Mike Armano from DPH, and just saying that the mask, or just reminding folks that the mask order is in effect until the city of Lawrence moves out of a higher risk level. And I'll just read it. It says, a higher risk level shall be defined as a period when the percent positivity of molecular tests among the city of Lawrence residents reaches a level of 4% or higher over a 14 period, and when the incident rate of new COVID-19 cases among city of Lawrence residents reaches a level of an average of 10 or more cases per day over a 14-day period using a per capita calculation of 100,000 population, or as determined by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And details may be found on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts website. So it's just a reminder that in Lawrence, using those metrics, the order for masks is in effect until the city moves out of a higher risk level. And as of last Friday, the 2-week positivity rate is 21.2%, and the average daily rate case rate is 119. So because of those reasons, just wanted to publicly state that the mask mandate is still being followed. Great. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Before we
Oh,
adjourn,
please.
I do have a question. Yeah, I know that we get a lot of emails and correspondence before we come to these meetings. And sometimes we respond to them, sometimes we don't. Mostly, I don't respond to most of the correspondence. But we did get a particular letter from the paraprofessionals regarding their salaries. And while I know and I understand that we are not supposed to be dealing with those kinds of situations because they're probably in contracts or negotiations, I do want to acknowledge that we did receive that, and that I hope maybe the superintendent can answer this, or even the chair, as to what is being done in terms of their requests on that letter.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comment. If I would just say that, so a few things. One is that, as this board knows, through an executive session we had several months ago, like we have a cycle of different contracts that we're going to be in consultation with. The LTU has started now. The paras are starting later in the month. What I would also like to do is, for this board, we need to come back together to discuss, as we began, the strategy for all of those. And I would like to do that in executive session, which is allowed under, to discuss strategy only. And so I will be calling an executive session, and I've sort of asked the superintendent for that with legal counsel to give us an update on where we're at, but then also to discuss strategy as it relates to not only the paras, but, we need to be updated and sort of provide direction for how we want those things to shape out. So we will be engaging in that as a board. But then also I think it's important to, then we'll report out, sort of status of those kind of things in terms of the different, negotiations, consultations. So, I would say that's absolutely appropriate and something that we need to discuss to provide guidance to the district staff on how we, as a board, would like them to, move forward with those negotiations.
Thank you. Yeah, especially based on the presentation that we had tonight in terms of why certain people are leaving the district based on salaries and other things. And if we take into consideration the fact that, some of the fast food chains are offering people over and above the current state wages in order to retain or gain new employees, I think that is something that we should definitely look at. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? All right, Jess? Pat?
Yes.
Julia? And the chair votes yes, so we are now adjourned. Thank you.